Some people deal with, their loved ones being only in active addiction for a couple months or years, where the collateral damage isn't awful yet, but they definitely see that trend. And then you have families that are just completely broken because their loved one has been struggling for a decade, 15, 20 years. I would say what best works for you, because I don't know if there's really a true blueprint on how to help someone. But it really boils down to, does this person need empathy or does this person need tough love? And I think whatever you have to employ to ensure that person's success, and the vital part that family members need to realize is that they need to keep their sanity and they need to keep their own health. And some people just don't want to get clean, and that's the fatal nature of this disease, and some people never do. But you have to ensure that you're healthy to help someone else. And if the pain is just too great, then, sometimes, especially in my situation, I truly believe tough love was my saving grace. Does tough love work all the time? Absolutely not. Some people need, that empathy and to know that you're there. But really what it boils down to is, as a family member or a spouse or someone who's dealing with someone in active, addiction, is to let them know you're there for them. But, until you're ready for some change or for some help, I need to keep this healthy boundary and distance. And it's all about healthy boundaries when you're dealing with someone in active addiction. I'm Taylor Falk, and I'm a certified recovery specialist at West Branch Drug and Alcohol Abuse Commission. I'm 31 years old. My birthday was last week, so I'm still stuck in the 30 mode.
What was your path from where you began and where you are now and where you work and what you do?
So I obviously, as a certified recovery specialist, which I do now, you have to be a person in active recovery. So with that being said, I started drinking and experimenting with some substances, mostly marijuana, in high school, about 16, 17. I started drinking by the time I was 15. By the time I got to college, when I was 19, I started experimenting with cocaine, stuff like that, the harder stuff. Hallucinogens, stuff of that nature. And then my sophomore year of college, I broke my back playing football, and I was prescribed prescription painkillers. And at that time, we're talking about well over a decade ago, there wasn't as much information. I think doctors had just different protocols in general, and it led me to pretty significant opiate addiction, which soon turned, I would say I did prescription opiates for about a year and a half. Then it went on to a full-blown heroin addiction, which lasted to an upwards of about 6 years. I actively used heroin. And then eventually, past catches up with us. I ended up being arrested in this county, and this is how I kind of became aware of West Branch, because I was placed on Lycoming County Treatment Court with Shay, and that's how I kind of know her. And I completed the program in 2 years, and that was kind of my, it was really my first ever real crack at recovery. And, I graduated, and I have been clean ever since. So my sobriety date is December 2nd, 2015. So I have a little over 6 years clean right now.
What was the catalyst to starting that road to recovery?
Honestly, that's a tough question, because I think there's multiple components or variables that led to that. But ultimately, if I could place my finger on one thing, it was the emotional pain and I hated destroying everything in my life. My family didn't want anything to do with me. Before I went to jail, I was homeless for about 6 months. I completely sabotaged my own life, and I destroyed everything around me. There was tons of collateral damage, and I just got to a point where I think I met my pain threshold. Enough was enough. I was sick of living that way. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror, and I knew I needed a change. I just wasn't sure how to go about that at first, and even if it was possible. And I truly believe just, obviously there was some legal repercussions that prompted me, and I was mandated to do certain things for my own recovery. But I still had to do a lot of legwork outside of the treatment court realm. And I think that, I just knew that there was a far better life for me than what I was currently living in.
What was the hardest part? Is there one thing that was the hardest part of recovery, or is there a multiple?
I think the hardest part of recovery early on, I would say this would probably be between freshly in recovery, so a couple days clean to about a year or so clean, is just kind of changing your perspectives and behaviors and your thought patterns and stuff like that. Because I noticed even without consuming alcohol or drugs, I still had a lot of those negative thoughts, perspectives, and thought patterns that basically was a culmination of 8 years of, active addiction. And I think it was just surrounding myself around the right people. Staying away from those certain people, places, and things that I knew were triggers, that I knew were no good. And the tough part about that is a lot of those acquaintances and quote-unquote friends that you had, a lot of those people you had to cut out of your life to kind of ensure that you would be able to maintain this road to recovery.
Did that recovery take you back to your family? You said for a while they kind of...
Yeah, and that was by far the hardest part of active addiction for me, was basically losing touch with my parents. What happened to me was no fault of their own. They were phenomenal parents. I mean, I grew up, nothing traumatic happened. I didn't come from a broken household. My parents have been together my whole life. Raised me with morals and integrity, which I so choose personally not to live by for a certain amount of time. But yeah, just knowing how close I was to them. And they were at a point, and I want to preface this because they gave me plenty of chances. We're talking hundreds and hundreds. So they were basically left with either we love you with tough love or you're going to die. And honestly, I really think they saved my life because, there was a point where my parents blocked my number from their phone. There was no Christmases, no Thanksgivings. I was, completely alienated, which was by choice. But that was definitely the thing that probably hurt the most. And that was something that was one of the blessings of recovery. And I ended up living with them right out of jail as my home plan. I think that was a pretty pivotal point because we had such a burned relationship, and there was no trust there, that living with them for those 2 years, we were able to learn how to interact again, learn how to trust again. And that has, been one of the top of my list for things that I've gained back since being clean.
Your relationship today is mended?
Yes. Yeah. Our relationship is, honestly, probably our relationship is as good as it's ever been. And I think that's a lot of personal growth on my part. But, I always feel no matter how close to your parents you are when you're young, it's kind of like, A, you think you know everything, or, you know, I'm not sure, but I know for certain that basically everything they told me when I was young, everything about life in general has held true. And we have just a wonderful relationship today.
So how does all these experiences you're telling me about in your recovery, how does that help you in your job today? And what does your job today entail?
So as, you know, I think, and that's the really unique part about being a certified recovery specialist, is that to be certified through the state of Pennsylvania, you have to be in active recovery. There is a requirement of at least 18 months of continuous sobriety. So I think, you know, it's a really unique position in the sense that, you know, I don't want to say I guess we can kind of be mentors to these people, because, you know, we have individuals that sometimes they're new to recovery, and sometimes they're still in active addiction and they're still struggling. And I think it's that shared common trait that really allows those doors to open, with being comfortable and being transparent with our issues going on, and really allowing us to advocate for them and tell them kind of our experience on what works, what doesn't work, you know, try to stay away from this stuff. And, you know, being active parts and active members in recovery, it really allows us to kind of help them find their own support systems and introduce them to other people who are living the right life. And that's really been, you know, very rewarding for me. Because especially the people who are still struggling, when I talk to them, you know, sometimes they don't even have to say anything. I can just see that pain in their eyes, that hopelessness, that despair, that, is this the way I'm going to die? And just being able to tell them, hey, there's light at the end of the tunnel if you get through this. There is hope for you. If I can do it, you can do it. It's not going to be easy, but the rewards of it later down the road, you know, is something that, you know, I think we kind of undersell ourselves, especially early in recovery, in the sense of how much recovery can really give us. Because I know if, you know, everything that I have regained from being clean, and even gained that I didn't have before, is way beyond my wildest dreams. And that's just something that, you know, is probably, you know, the rewarding thing, is that we can just offer some hope and some shared personal experience and really help those individuals.
Through your work and through your recovery, have you seen changes in the way addiction is perceived by the general public, or changes in the approach to recovery?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be always some stigma, right? And that's another, you know, kind of special part about, you know, the recovery specialist and peer support specialist, because it gives the people outside of the recovery community kind of this, you know, vision of, oh, they can be successful, you know, they can make it. And that's the thing, though. I think there's always going to be stigma just because of what drug addiction brings. You know, thefts, crimes, you know, skewed relationships, stuff like that. And, you know, that's something that'll probably always be around. But I've seen a massive, you know, stigma change, or, you know, lack thereof, especially in like the hospital setting, especially with the providers and nurses, where, you know, the old protocol was you had an individual that was suffering from substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder, treat them, make sure they're medically stable, and then let's get them out the door. Now it's, okay, let's bring them in, let's connect them with these certain pieces in the community, let's bring in the certified recovery specialist, and let's formulate a plan that not guarantees success, but gives them a lot better chance of succeeding when they get discharged, so they don't have to come back in again. And I think that's where, and just being readily available in the hospitals and being present, we've kind of showed the providers and the nursing staff that, we are people at the end of the day, and just because where they might be right now doesn't mean that's where they're going to be the rest of their lives.
Now we know alcoholism is a disease, has the thinking of addiction, and what we know about opioids and the changes in brain chemistry in the last 10 years. Have you seen any of those changes?
Yeah, I think, not so much maybe a change, but I know we were trying to get this, opioid epidemic under, somewhat under control. And I think with the outpouring of community supports and stuff like that, especially like the warm handoff programs in the hospital, which was basically structured to help overdose survivors get into treatment as promptly as possible. I think what we've kind of realized though, or what I've seen, is that at least from the hospital setting, there's really no, one thing's worse than the other. Because we've seen just, traumatic cases of what alcohol withdrawal and alcohol detox can do. We see the significant psychological changes that methamphetamine use brings, and obviously the physical dependence that opiate addiction brings too. So I think it's, kind of an all-encompassing kind of picture now. Sure, obviously during the opioid epidemic, the goal was we need to put in preventative measures for the fatal overdoses, but we need to somehow be there for the overdose survivors. But I think just overall, I think we truly see the significance of any substance use or alcohol use disorder and how much, havoc that really, for health and everything else, psychological stuff. So I think it's just everybody realized that a drug is a drug is a drug. And, it gets to a certain point where they all can be, life altering.
What resources are available through West Branch Drug and Alcohol you would like the general public to know that they might not be aware of? So
the main resources we offer starts basically, the meat and potatoes of what we do is our case management unit. What they do is they'll do assessments, screenings with individuals that could be coming from the community, that can be coming from a hospital, could be coming home from a rehab, a mental health facility, prisons. They just kind of engage that individual and give them and set them up with the best resources to ensure their success. Whether that's outpatient counseling, it could be mental health counseling. We offer housing assistance. We offer, a good plethora of stuff. And after the case management unit, we do have a prevention team. And that prevention team normally goes into the schools. So like the old school DARE, I think it's too good for drugs now, but they'll kind of go in the schools, educate the faculty, do special lessons with each grade to kind of give them, a better idea of, what to be cautious for, what to look for. And they do offer services for adolescents and juveniles who might be actively struggling. And then we obviously have our certified recovery specialist team that does the warm handoff at the hospital. We cover UPMC Williamsport, Muncie, and Lock Haven. We also meet with individuals out in the community, and we're involved. I guess everybody's heavily involved in the county treatment court system. You know, and although I do think it's changing, I still think there's this misconception that what we're like is what we're going to be like forever. And I think that's going to probably hold true till the test of time. But I just want people to know that those loved ones or those people or those individuals that they see in active addiction is probably not a true representation of themselves. You know, it comes with a lot of prices and a lot of demons, but there is absolutely hope. And I mean, I know countless people that have, you know, completely turned their lives around. And there is, I mean, I know people in recovery who are lawyers that own international businesses. I mean, they're you wouldn't, if you looked at them now or talked to them or saw the success of their business or job or whatever they were doing, you would never suspect that they had a drug or alcohol problem in the past. So there is, not only is there transformation to get back to the person that they was, I mean, we're seeing a lot of individuals becoming the best versions of themselves by far, even dating pre-drug and alcohol use.